Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, December 3rd Select Board meeting. At this time, I'm going to ask Jan if the meeting's been properly warned because we didn't have an executive session again.
Yes, it has.
It has, and here comes David. Dun, 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 dun. Here's David. Excellent. All right. So at this time, I would take a motion to approve the meeting minutes from November 12th and November 19th.
So moved.
Wonderful. Liz has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chair's remarks. I do have remarks, but I need to pull them up, please. And thank you. This is regarding a community event taking place this Saturday, December 7th, starting at noon and ending at 3 at the Stone Church. This is called the Awareness Raising, Bread Breaking, and Noise Making Forum. But for those of you who kind of have been following town events, this is the Community Equity Committee that is comprised of people who are actually suffering from housing insecurity, substance addiction, poverty. It's kid-friendly. There's going to be food and coffee, tea, games, live music, and a panel discussion. You're not going to want to miss that. So it kicks off at noon with kids' activities, music, and food. Feed the kids first, obviously. Keep them calm. And then from 2 to 3 is the panel discussion with current members of Lived Experience. There is a $10 donation suggested, and you can bring winter clothing to donate. And I really wouldn't miss that panel because it's our community members that are actually experiencing the challenges rather than us on the fringes who think we know what the challenges are talking, as we often are the ones talking the most. So once again, that's this Saturday from 12 to 3 with the actual panel starting at 2 o'clock. So those are my comments, and I would now go to Peter for manager's comments. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I had more comments.
You were there?
Nope.
Okay.
More of my comments?
We'll just move on. So I'm going to give an update about the storm. Later in the meeting, we did have an update we also want to provide to the community in follow-up to last week's issuance of a health order by the select board. There it is now.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead and then I'll do the
Just
storm.
kidding. It's still my turn. So my next item, I'm still going to be reading off paper because it's not memorized, is an update on the health order. And this is regarding the violations that we had at 6 Reynolds Drive and 4850 Central Street. If you remember, we discussed it and we approved last week at the select board meeting, giving Will Hunter a deadline of Wednesday, which is this Wednesday, December 4th, to comply and come into compliance with correcting all violations. Deputy Health Inspector Officer Brian Bannon and the State of Vermont inspectors will re-inspect the property first thing Thursday at 9 a.m. If the inspectors find that not all previous identified violations have been corrected, the town can allow more time if significant progress has been made and there's a schedule in place for full compliance. Or the town could seek an injunction from the court compelling Mr. Hunter to come into full compliance by a date certain. New violations could be addressed through a new health order or emergency health order with or without a requirement for the tenants to vacate the premises, and that's depending on the number and severity of any such new violations. Continue, Peter.
Thank you. So the most urgent announcement that I have regarding the storm is just to alert the public. Anybody who's been driving in downtown today has seen the signs and the flashing lights at the parking lots, but I want to make sure that anyone who hasn't been downtown knows that there will be snow clearing going on this evening, and we expect it to be tomorrow evening as well, in the downtown, on Main Street and the side streets, and in the parking lots. Vehicles that are parked on street must be removed by 11 p.m. and vehicles that are in the parking lots must be removed by 1 a.m. so that snow clearing can proceed. People can park in the transportation center. We encourage that they do so in order to be, again, off the streets by 11 and out of the parking lots by 1. It's free parking overnight in the transportation center, although if you leave your car there past 9 o'clock in the morning, then it's pay and display after 9 a.m. If the transportation center becomes full, there's overflow parking allowed at the Preston parking lot across Flat Street from the transportation center. And a quick summary of the storm. We all know that it lasted for the better part of 2 days, 2.5 days. Beginning on Sunday in the afternoon at about 3 p.m., the Public Works crews began their work, and they continued for 24 hours throughout the night and until 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. Went home for about 12 hours of rest and came in at 3 o'clock in the morning this morning in order to go back out and clear additional snow that had fallen overnight. The total accumulation varied from about 18 to 22 inches, depending on where you were in town. And the crews went back home at 3 o'clock this afternoon, but will be back on duty after an 8-hour break at 11 o'clock tonight to man that snow clearing process alongside contractors who assist with that work. Because of the volume of snow, we do want to warn the public and acknowledge that it will take 2 nights to clear the snow from the downtown district and from side streets. The sidewalk tractors have been out clearing the sidewalks. It's been important that there is now a second sidewalk tractor that's available for storms, particularly a storm of the intensity of this. There were places on the sidewalks where, from the snow that fell and the snow that was thrown by the plows to clearing the streets, where there was over 5 feet of snow on sidewalks in particular locations. So, and one other acknowledgement, the downtown crosswalk snow removal, which was again something that we hadn't done until about 2 years ago, but did add as an increased level of service so that at the intersections in the downtown area, we have contractors now who come and shovel those out. Because of the duration of this storm and how much snow was falling, the contractors came out several times during the storm, and our observation and our feedback is that they did a good job of keeping those connections between downtown sidewalks and the crosswalks clear. We do want to remind all residents not to park on the streets overnight, and please don't plow, shovel, or blow snow out into the streets or onto the sidewalks, as that obviously thwarts the community-wide effort to clean up. So that's the report on the storm. Unfortunately, I also have sad news from and about the Public Works Department. Anthony Bombasino, who's a Public Works employee, 36 years old, died this week. And we want to extend our condolences to his family. Anthony had been fighting cancer bravely, but passed away. And it's an enormous loss, obviously, for the folks who work side by side with him every day in the Public Works Department, but for all of us who were his teammates in town government and for our community. This is a dedicated public servant, and it's heavy on the minds of these Public Works crews clearing the streets for us these last couple of days during the snowstorm to not have Anthony alongside them in that effort. So I'd ask that we have a moment of silence for Anthony Bombasino.
Thank you for that, Peter. It's tragic. Reading the story online was tragic. Heart goes out to his family, as all of ours do. We might be what seems like a large employer, but we're pretty close-knit, and everybody knows everybody, and it's a close-knit team on Public Works for sure. So at this time, moving out of that good period of silence, I'm going to ask my fellow board members if they have questions or comments or committee reports or anything they'd like to share this evening. David, I see you looking like you do.
And I have to, imitation being the sincerest form of flattery, I too will read my announcement. This is regarding the recent announcement by Superintendent Lyle Holliday that she will be retiring at the end of the school year. And the supervisory union has set up a process for hiring a new person. I want to read this public announcement that went out announcing a meeting. This is from Carrie Amadon, who is the Vernon chair and also the chair of the supervisory union board. We welcome you to attend the upcoming public meeting in regards to the WSESU superintendent search. At the most recent supervisory union board meeting, the Superintendent Search Exploratory Committee was established to lay the foundation for this process. The committee will hold our first meeting on Thursday, December 5th, that's this Thursday, at 3:30 p.m. in the multipurpose room at the Brattleboro Union High School. That meeting is starting at 3:30 because we wanted to make sure that administrators and staff were engaged very early in the process. We'll be having additional meetings later in the evening for people that are working at that time. Please note that the exploratory committee is not the committee that will choose the superintendent. We are the committee that will brainstorm, discuss, and debate options to recommend to the supervisory union board as possible paths forward for the selection process. Input at this time, and this is where you all come in, input at this time will be invaluable and greatly appreciated as this committee works toward assisting in the important choice that will impact our students, staff, and community. So again, that's Thursday evening at 3:30 in the multipurpose room at the high school. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Liz or Tim, is there
No,
anything
thank
you'd like to comment on or report about? No?
I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Then at this time, I will open the floor to public comments from the community. This is an opportunity to speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda. Please know that because it's not a warrant item when you speak, we cannot engage in robust conversation. That is saved for warrant items that are formalized on the agenda. With that stated, who would like to go first? Kurt? You know the routine.
Hi, my name is Kurt Dimes. I live in Brattleboro. Considering the stresses and the joys, but especially the stresses of the holidays and the political climate and the climate emergency and all, I would request the board make a motion for declaring snow day, which could be random snowball fights sanctified and supervised by the police, or snowman making contest. I think it'd be great.
I love that idea. I don't think we're going to do that tonight, but I actually love that idea. I think that's one of the best things you've brought forward in a while. I like it. Thank you. Who would like to go next tonight? Shanta? I don't know why I thought Cassandra was holding a baby.
Hello. Hi, thank you for hearing me tonight.
Yes, and please introduce yourself for the TV viewing audience.
That's right. My name is Ishana Artra, and I live in Brattleboro.
Thank you.
And I am here tonight to talk about the cell tower that is proposed to be installed in the steeple of the First Congregational Church in West Brattleboro.
Mm-hmm.
Before I do, though, first I want to acknowledge that this is a very heated topic, and it's set amidst national uprising, quite frankly, around the proliferation of cell towers, the rapid proliferation of cell towers in our towns and neighborhoods. I was thinking about this today as I was preparing to talk about the position that you're in, the select board. And you're in a hot seat. I had the image today of like a sandwich being squeezed, and you're in the middle. The setting is really contentious. The Federal Communications Commission is being called to task. They have not updated their safety guidelines since 1996. And the Government Accountability Office is aware of this and has recommended that they reassess. There hasn't been action taken. Congress people have been writing to the FCC. The U.S. Supreme Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. Recently ruled that the FCC was acting without reason and capriciously when they eliminated the historic and environmental review from cell tower permitting. And there are parents and teachers and doctors all across America who have been, and others, who have been crying out saying enough exposure, unsafe exposure to radio wave radiation. And so then I've been thinking about what your role is in all of this. And as the Select Board and also the Board of Health for Brattleboro, I feel that your role, and I'm speaking for myself, but also as a member of EMF Safety for Vermont, so sometimes I might say we as well.
Understood.
Thank you. Is to comment on the permit applications that come through the Public Utility Commission in a way that stands for environmental, historical, health, quality of life for the citizens, aesthetic quality, environmental health, air quality. Radio frequency radiation is considered electrosmog. It's considered an environmental toxin. It's a class 2B carcinogen. And so that's really what I'm here tonight to talk about a little bit, is what are the questions that this raises for our select board and as the select board and also as the Board of Health. So I was looking at the title 18, I believe, for the select board's role as the Board of Health. And I'm going to make sure I get that right for the record. Yes, Title 18, Chapter 3, specifically 126, 128. Anyway, I'll tell you that later, but I'm also going to hand this to you, too.
Okay.
And how I see it, you have an obligation, a responsibility, and an authority to thoroughly consider the health impacts and to protect the public from health hazards and risks. And that's a really important statement that's made in the statute, hazards and risks. Risks, class 2B carcinogens are risks. So speaking up feels appropriate. It seems like an appropriate thing for the Board of Health of Brattleboro to do. So I'm speaking to you tonight about the possibility of your advocating for a safe, secure, reliable, reasonable alternative to the proposed multiple new cell towers in Brattleboro, starting with the steeple of West Brattleboro's first Congregational Church, which would hover over the West B Nursery School. It would also be set just a few hundred feet from the Academy School and a few hundred feet from the fire station. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but the International Firefighters Association has a resolution, number 15. And that resolution exempts firefighters from having cell towers sited near them. So if there's any order that orders cell towers to be deployed without review, this resolution, when it's adopted by a municipality, exempts the firefighters. It's Resolution 15. And this is because of the migraines, the vertigo, the disorientation, the attention, the focus deficit, the mood changes, and other symptoms that would take over firefighters who were living near cell towers. A study was done, and the results of the study were used to argue for the exemption. And in California, that exemption has been made, and there have been other locations as well. So I wanted to offer you that consideration.
I appreciate, well, I will say that we usually do 2 minutes at public participation.
Okay.
So if you
All right. If I could
could
wrap
bring
up
it to
real quick.
closure.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've heard the argument that that the Board of Health, and I understand it's complicated right now, is deferring to the FCC for determining whether or not the cell towers are safe. And so what I'm bringing to your attention tonight is that right now there are cases being brought against the FCC about the lack of safety, updating their safety regulations to match those around the world, and that the environmental and historic review has been reinstated. And if there's any way that that can be applied to any cell towers in Brattleboro, I urge you to make a case for that. And to please, please, please make comment as individuals or members of the Board of Health or as the Select Board members to the Public Utility Commission, and to alert the public when a cell tower is being proposed, such as in the First Congregational Church in West Brattleboro. As we're aware, that notice is, you can make that notice, and that would be very valuable for the public to know.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I will personally dedicate myself to taking a closer look at this than I ever have, which is zero look.
Okay, I appreciate
I
that
will
very
take a look.
much.
Yep,
Great.
very much. Thank you.
I was supposed to mention the precautionary principle, so that you have an opportunity, the public has an opportunity to look up the precautionary
The
principle
precautionary principle.
as it relates to this issue.
Thank you very much. Are there other members of the community who would like to speak on a topic that is not listed on tonight's agenda? Yes. Please come forward and state your name and your location.
Hi, my name is Mary Stowe. Can you hear me?
Yes. Well, maybe a little louder would
All
be
right.
nice.
Okay. I live in Brattleboro also. I just have been involved in these kind of what happened from the last meeting. And I just would like to remind everyone that, I mean, it's very clear to us, we know that we live in a time of fake news, right? And not everything we read we can rely on. So if it falls on you to, find out about the safety of cell towers and electromagnetic radiation and so on. I would like you to just be really, really careful that what you're reading is not something that's been written by the industry, because a lot of things that are out there are not accurate, and it's very easy to be taken in by that. So I've sent you all an email
Yes.
with an example about that.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay?
Are there other members of the community who would like to speak on something that is not listed on tonight's agenda? Cassandra? You know the drill.
I do. My name is Cassandra Holloway, and I'm in Brattleboro, and I also am the director of now Building a Positive Community. So we just changed our name, so it's going to be it's official, and we're really excited about it. I wanted just to share it all with you. So if
Nice.
you start hearing what's building a positive community, it's still BAPC. So we were very smart to keep the acronym, which most of us know. Most people know us as anyway. And we're going to be really broadening our work to really focus on developmental assets. So we'll still be doing what we have been doing relatively, but also kind of branching off more into how do we build assets in our community for our young people. And I know David's invited us somewhat to talk to the school board. Diana Wally has run a program called, she's been running the social competency program through the school district for the last 10 years, and we do middle school leadership trainings, and we've been kind of shadowing her, and we're going to be taking over a big hunk of that. So it's also timely for our name change. So when we're talking with our kids, they kind of get it. So and we're really excited to bring our youth and give them more voice. So hopefully you'll be seeing more youth over the next year as well. So just wanted to share that news with you.
Excellent. And I actually really like that name change. That sounds good. That feels right. Nice job.
I still don't have any idea what your group does.
Oh,
Sorry.
marketing moment.
Yes. So we've been around. I've been saying 25 years, but it very well might be 30, so I got to check that before we fully launch. So we started, we have been a substance abuse prevention coalition. So we have been working again in this community for between 25 and 30 years. And we had a drug-free community grant for 10 years prior to me becoming a director, and we've been running 6 months past that, 6 years past that. So now what we're really trying to do is broaden the work we do, partially for sustainability, but it's also important that we, again, focus on assets, because the more assets we have in the community for our kids, internal assets, which is that social competency piece, assets within their schools, within their families, and also within the community, which is hence the name. That's kind of what we do, is we look at how do we support all of those areas for our young people to thrive. And the more that we have assets, the less risks they'll have, not just with substances, but other, behaviors that might cause them harm. So,
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you. Check out our website. It's bapc802.org.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the community who would like to speak on something that is not listed on tonight's agenda? Okay. Hearing no more comments, I would go ahead and move us all the way down to new business, with our first order of new business being resolution supporting municipal authority in a commercial cannabis system. Peter?
Thank you. So the details of this are set forth in a memorandum from me to you dated November 25th. And the essence of it is that the legislature has been working on cannabis deregulation and legalization for the last several years, and going through a process of gradually making it more and more legal, and is expected in the upcoming 2020 legislative session to actually fully legalize cultivation, processing, commercial cultivation. Right now it's limited to personal use in small quantities, but it's expected that there'll be full legalization of commercial cultivation, processing, distribution, and sale of cannabis in Vermont. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns has been engaged on behalf of Vermont's municipalities in the discussion for the several years while it's been evolving, and has not taken a position either supporting or opposing legalization, but has been very strongly supporting the position that if there is a commercial market for cannabis that is legalized, that it should be rolled out in a way that gives enough time for municipalities to be prepared to address the impacts, and provides mechanisms for municipalities to have the proper authority and funding to prevent harmful impacts and address other impacts to the community. In that continuing effort, because of the fact that this is viewed as likely the session when the final questions will get answered and the legislation will be finalized and adopted, the League is asking all Vermont municipalities to adopt a resolution that stands for a slower pace and more authority for municipalities and more opportunity for funding than what exists in the currently drafted legislation. So attached to this memorandum before you this evening is a resolution that's proposed for the Brattleboro Selectboard to add its voice to the collaborative effort among municipalities all across Vermont to, again, not weigh in on whether or not cannabis should be legalized, but that if it does get legalized, that it's important for health, safety, and welfare across Vermont that municipalities be empowered to properly regulate it and collect enough revenue to support the efforts that'll be required in order to provide that regulation.
Great.
I ask you to approve the resolution.
Do we need to read the resolution, Peter?
You don't need to, but if you'd like it read, I'd be happy to.
I think that might be a good idea,
Okay?
because it's such a muddy bill in itself sometimes.
Sure. This is a resolution supporting municipal authority in a commercial cannabis system. Whereas a regulated and taxed recreational cannabis marketplace will affect communities across Vermont. Whereas the 2019-2020 Vermont League of Cities and Towns municipal policy calls for any legislation legalizing commercial cannabis to address the impacts on municipalities, school populations, first responders, municipal regulations, and municipal budgets. Whereas states that currently have a commercial cannabis market have guaranteed municipal governments local regulatory authority, taxing authority, and revenue sharing, and Vermont cities and towns need at a minimum those same guaranteed powers. Whereas all cannabis establishments that cultivate, process, manufacture, or sell cannabis will be wholly located in our cities and towns, and voters in cities and towns must be granted the right to opt in to hosting cannabis establishments within their community. A quick digression, the importance of that language
Sounds a little.
is there's a debate in the legislature as to whether everybody's in unless you opt out, or whether it should be an opt-in system where municipalities would not have commercial cannabis activities in their community unless they choose to opt in by a vote of the people. And so,
Can I jump in?
Yes.
It is very common in Vermont to have to opt in. And that's with banking, with many things. Most places make you opt out of certain things, like in banking for overdraft protection on your debit card, but Vermont has traditionally been an opt-in, which is actually a protection on consumers and citizens.
and that's why it's included within this resolution. So continuing now with the resolution, whereas all duly adopted ordinances and land use policies and regulations adopted by municipalities pursuant to 24 VSA Chapter 117 and 24 VSA Section 2291 must be upheld in any commercial cannabis system, whereas local cannabis control commissions must be given the same level of authority as local liquor control commissions, and whereas cities and towns must be granted authority to assess licensing and permitting fees for cannabis establishments. Now therefore be it resolved by the Select Board of the Town of Brattleboro that if the state of Vermont legalizes a taxed and regulated cannabis market, then 1, the Town of Brattleboro supports including in that legislation provisions that adequately address all aforementioned local considerations and concerns. 2, the Town of Brattleboro supports state collection and remittance of a local cannabis tax of 5% in any community that hosts retail cannabis establishments. And 3, the Town of Brattleboro calls upon the state of Vermont's administration and legislature to provide communities with adequate time and clarity in law for local officials and community members to discuss the local implications of such a market and to update, clarify, and/or establish local regulations and policies as needed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're looking basically to be able to allow our community members to have buy-in, to allow ourselves to opt in, and to allow ourselves to maximize taxes, basically. Maximize the money to control the market and to allow community members buy-in on said market. Members of the board want to have some discussion on this
I just
item?
add one thing to that. If you think about all the things that happen at the state level that we wind up having to pay for, and that's plenty of that happens in the town and even more in the schools, I think. That's part of what this is trying to address, is that we're able to tax so that we can cover the costs that we know and that every community that's done this knows are going to come.
Other board members would like to speak on this topic? Otherwise, I'm going to come to the community.
I just want to point out that the 5%, just so people are aware, the numbers for taxation in the Senate and House both hover somewhere between 16 and 20%, if I'm understanding correctly, where it stands right now.
For the
state.
Yeah.
For the state,
Right.
correct.
And one of those documents presumes that 2% less a cut, an administrative cut, would be the local share, and the other presumes 1%. And so the ask here is that 5% without an administrative cut be fully remunerated back to the, remitted, I should say, back to the municipalities where it was collected.
Right. So I think people should understand that we're just trying to establish some sort of balance of fairness. If that's going to be highly taxed like that, the towns that take a large burden really should be, be getting some of
1%.
that. The other issue I just want to throw out there is that the idea of being cannabis commissioners, aside from being liquor commissioners, is interesting. I would think that there might be some discussion about wrapping those both together. I don't know how other people feel, but
I think there probably will be later on.
Actually, there has been, and the legislature is, at this time at least, very explicitly keeping them separate.
yeah.
Do we get T-shirts?
Yes. We will print T-shirts downtown.
Well, that just brings up another point, that it's not just the taxing, but it's also control. that we're
Yes,
looking
and that's
for.
really
Exactly
important.
Yeah.
Really important.
Yeah.
Control and buy-in.
one other amplification is probably appropriate here. I know that you're aware of it here at the table, but for the community's sake, the reason why the taxation is important, I think it's probably pretty clear on its face why the local authority is important in order to be able to address local impacts. But the reason that the revenue raising alongside that is important is that based on the actual experience in states where marijuana has been legalized, we have a reasonable expectation that there will be a substantial workload, not just in the police department, as people might think to be more obvious, but also in the planning department, where the regulation of this in terms of the land use activities, the way the land use regulations apply to what businesses are appropriate in which parts of town and so on. There's a significant degree to which that sort of commercial regulation side as opposed to law enforcement regulation has been a burden to communities.
So a lot we don't know, but it's a good idea to get ahead of it and make our voices known. Perhaps.
And make them known strongly with a strong case for control and money, basically.
Indeed.
We might want to add, if that's the case, we want to add some lobbying activities to, at least with our local legislators, to the resolution, because the resolutions go in a stack and they go to the committee and that's where they sit. So it's the follow-up that makes a difference.
I can assure you that those of us on town staff who have a role in this and will be participating actively in the league's coordinated lobbying. But certainly, if select board members want to be involved in that as well, we can coordinate around your calendars so that you know when would be the time to make a trip to Montpelier.
Or we can just talk to our.
Or you certainly should talk to the local folks, yes.
And every town has a representative in the legislature. If the select boards are talking to them, it would be a lot easier to get through.
Yeah, that's a good point. So part of this is definitely to spread the word locally, based on you taking this action this evening, if you do choose to take it. The additional step, and what I was leaping ahead to without acknowledging that first step here locally, is there will come a time when additional testimony is going to be taken in Montpelier by the committees that are going to act on this legislation, and the league will be coordinating municipal officials coming and testifying at that time, and we'll participate in that as well.
I did have a quick conversation with Becca Ballant fairly recently and hinted that we might ask her to come in so that we could discuss it more fully once it becomes an actual thing that looks like it's going in a direction. But she did think there was going to be some movement on it. Whether or not it's going to pass is another question entirely. But, so.
Are there members of the community that are here to speak on this item tonight? Sandra.
We're really here mostly to listen, but what I will say is we're only funded until June to actually provide technical assistance to municipalities with this issue. So if you want to tap, like us now's the time, because as of June, we may not have funding, which goes to that 5%. The state does have money for alcohol and tobacco, but we are getting less and less in the prevention and recovery, the whole continuum of care. So it's also something that you also have to be, thinking about too, is how do you want to support our young people around this, because the state might not. They will say they will, but what I will say is we're not seeing that with tobacco and alcohol. It goes to other infrastructure and other things, and we're competing for it now, and now we're told we might not have any to address tobacco, which is kind of concerning with the juuling being such a big issue. So I'm just letting you know, I'm not, gonna speak to how we feel about it, but I do want to say that the more the town has control of this, the better. And we're here to support you in whatever way you want. And you have us, as we have connections to the state and to cities and leagues. So, please use us while you have us.
Thank you very much for coming up and letting us know that, and letting us know your funding deadline. That's important for us as we make plans to have agenda items and follow the legislative bills coming through. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to try to put it in a tab somewhere for before, as the session gets going a little bit, we can check in with our reps.
Yep, that would be a good idea. Further comments from community members or board members? I'm going to mix it up. Anybody? Ricky?
Hi, I'm Ricky Rosati, District 2 in Brattleboro, New Montesquieu County, the Second Republic of Vermont. And my first question is, does the public have an option of voting against being taxed on cannabis?
I don't know if the state's going to give that.
Right now, the legislation is being formulated, so there isn't a law that says the public does have that vote, and there isn't a law that says the public doesn't.
You could reach out to Jeanette White. She's one of the most
She never
active
messages me
people.
back, so I
Oh.
wouldn't expect anything from her at this point.
All right.
So I would define us not being enabled with the right to vote on being taxed as fascism. And already just the idea of taxing medicine for people when we're only forecasted to have a 1% over the next 5 years given from taxes to human services is just a really not the future or the present I would vote for.
Okay. Thank you, Ricky. That's good insight.
Ricky does bring up an interesting question
Yeah.
about how they're going to approach medicinal marijuana as opposed to recreational marijuana. But
Yep.
it's more of stuff we don't know,
It
right?
sounds like that, having them come in and having a talk and maybe having Cassandra from
Building a positive community.
Building a Positive Community. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, yeah.
Come in maybe at the same time would be pretty beneficial
Oh, I
for
think so,
questions
too.
like this.
Yep.
I think so. Thank
Yep.
you, Ricky, very much. Further questions, comments, etc.? Is there anybody at this table who is feeling inclined to make a motion?
Certainly.
Okay.
I would. I'll make a motion that doesn't require me to read everything that Peter read to us. So I'll make a motion to approve a resolution supporting municipal authority in a commercial cannabis system as presented.
Okay. Tim has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Are there anybody opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're now going to move on to our next order of business under new business. I need your pen. And that is the acceptance of a proposal for unconscious bias and cultural humility training. Peter?
Thank you. As you're well aware, for 3 years now, it's been a select board goal and an area of concentrated effort for both the town members of town staff and members of the select board to promote racial equity in the community and social equity more broadly. The work began back in 2017, and at that time, the select board approved a set of goals for ways in which town government would both commit itself and demonstrate to the community our commitment to the work around racial equity and social equity. And I'll just read those quickly as sort of the broader perspective within which we'll be considering the proposal tonight. So the goals were to add a human resources professional to the town's senior management team, provide baseline training for all employees and the select board, baseline implicit bias training to town employees and the select board, changes in the town's recruitment practices for filling vacant staff positions, considering social equity in all town government decisions and actions, increasing collaboration with local schools on matters of diversity, inclusion, and equity, supporting the work of other individuals and organizations to promote diversity, inclusion, and equity in Brattleboro, and making the town's commitment to these actions visible in our community. We've made progress on all of these goals, except for the training of all town staff and the select board. On that goal, we consciously delayed implementing it until we were able to bring on a human resources professional so that we knew we would have the internal staff capacity to be able to follow up on the baseline training with an intentional and ongoing program of promoting equity as a fundamental part of the organizational culture of town government. Sally Nix joined our team as our Human Resources Director back in June of this year, and in September we issued the request for proposals that has led to the proposal that's before you tonight. We received 6 proposals from consultants who were interested in providing this training. One of those proposals didn't meet the town's specifications. It was actually proposing to train the trainer as opposed to train all employees. One other proposal was far more expensive than the others. It was a comprehensive proposal, but would have cost $40,000, where similar proposals were ranged at 4 others were clustered around $15,000 in the $14,000–$15,000 price range. And so we focused on those 4 proposals primarily in deciding what to recommend to you this evening. Curtis Reed has assisted the town. He's the founder of the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity, and active in various ways in the community and throughout the state for racial equity, promoting racial equity actions institutionally and person-to-person community conduct. Curtis has assisted us, and Sally Nix, our Human Resources Director, and I, together with Curtis, the 3 of us were the panel that reviewed the proposals. We agreed unanimously that one of the 4 proposals that were sort of clustered in being similar to one another in both content and price, one stood out as superior both in the content of the training and especially because it included follow-along services to help us launch a working group within town government to keep the work moving forward from the training that everyone would receive. That proposal was provided by Dottie Morris and Mary Gannon. They have both provided this same kind of training to other organizations in our area, and both have been active, Dottie more so over in Keene, Mary here in our community, for the cause of promoting racial equity. Their proposal is attached to my memorandum to you dated November 25th, I believe it was, 26th, that was in your backup materials and posted on the website. Their proposed fee is $14,342.88, and I'm happy to recommend to you that you authorize me to enter into an agreement with Ms. Morris and Ms. Gannon so that we can proceed with this training.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Are there members of the board that would like to speak on this topic?
Yes, I was happy to be present at the NAACP dinner where both women spoke, and I'm looking forward to working with them.
Yeah, I agree. I would have said something similar. That dinner was well attended, the energy was fabulous, and there can only be good things that come out of anybody that spoke there. So. Tim or David, anything you'd like to add?
No, just glad that we're here.
Excellent.
We got to this point finally.
Are there members of the community who would like to speak on this topic? Okay,
And
then.
I'll just say that it's satisfying. Kind of cut me off. I was going to. No. It's satisfying to get to the end of the process because, as it's mentioned in Peter's report here, it all kind of started in the Select Board Candidates Forum where we were candidates.
You and
for
I
the
were
first time.
candidates. That was,
Yeah.
I think, 15 to 35 years ago.
Very nice. Yeah, it feels like it
Yeah,
sometimes.
feels that way sometimes.
But as Peter explained, we've been making good progress, and I see this as a real outcome of a big democratic push from our community. So
I agree.
it's a positive thing. It feels like we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck here. So I'm pretty happy to move forward with it.
Me too.
I think it's truly it's the end of the process of getting to the step, but it's the beginning of the process of dealing with diversity and equity.
Yeah.
What
the
is
end
it?
of the beginning.
Fin
I
on the
agree.
boot. With every end, there is a beginning.
Yes, point well taken, and I would underscore that by saying that the progress that we've made has been in our work with the community. We have a commitment to doing that work internally with each other in addressing the way we work with one another and the way we work for the community. And it's exciting to be at the moment when the work that has been ongoing now these last few years between some of us in town government and the community we serve could be brought in to now be something that we will be working on together as an entire town government team.
Excellent. Well, at this time, is there somebody on this board who's inclined to make a motion?
I am.
Excellent, Liz.
Okay. I move to authorize the town manager to engage Dottie Morris and Mary Gannon for a fee of $14,342.88 to provide training and facilitating services in accordance with their proposal dated October 30th, 2019.
Okay, Liz has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Beautiful.
I also think we should note that the gender diversity of our staff is being represented.
It's pretty superior. We have a team of very fiercely gender diverse people.
May I have my form back? Did you guys sign my,
I didn't
We're not
walk
giving
it back.
Never.
I was waiting for Daniel.
So at this time, usually we take a break at 8 o'clock. We're about to go into budget discussions. I don't know if it's worthwhile to take a break now. Okay, we'll continue on and we'll wait until that point. So we are now going to move into our blue binders because we are moving into our FY21 proposed budget discussions, and we are going to start with the assessor's office.
Great. So
Peter.
as Jennifer Burnell, our town assessor, comes to the table, I'll just remind everybody that if you want to be following along with the line-by-line budget at home, you can go to the town's website at brattleboro.org, click on the home page over on the right-hand side under News on the link that says FY21 Proposed Budget. And then when you go to the page that has the documents of the FY21 Proposed Budget, you want to click on the third line down, FY21 Proposed Budget, which is the operating budget. And it's 18 pages long, and it has all the details for each of the different departmental operations. Tonight, we'll be hearing from Jennifer about the assessor's office, and then also the presentations for the planning department and the library.
Excellent, thank you, Peter.
what page is Jennifer?
Jennifer's on page 6.
I'm sorry, yes, page 6 is where the assessor's office.
On the second,
Sorry about that.
underneath the first line. And Jennifer, take it away as you like.
So first, I'd like to talk about the operations of the office before I go into the budget. Just to give you a brief summary of what I expect for going into the future here. We will be interviewing for a new staff member starting next week and are excited to be fully staffed again. My focus for this year will be to work with staff to shape an efficient office. I will start with cross-training, updating our data when necessary, cleaning up paper files, and working with staff to improve the process of the business license program. We will also work with our tax mapper to streamline the updates we send them and hopefully cut costs. There have been requests from other departments to meet with our office to understand their needs and how the grand list and other information in our office can help with their operations. Lastly, the Department of Taxes has put out an RFP for updated grand list software. The state supplies all towns with software that creates the grand list. The current supplier is NIMRIC, New England Municipal Resource Center. We have been told that Brattleboro will be one of around 10 towns chosen as a pilot town for the first rollout of this software. We're excited for that opportunity to work with this new software and the winning vendor. So that's just a little brief of how I sort of envision the Office of Assessment going forward. The budget that I put together is not unlike last year. It's very similar. A few changes. Professional services was decreased from $5,000 to $2,500. With staffing, I do not foresee the need for reaching out to professionals as we did in a couple of years prior. However, with new staffing, I did increase training. It's budgeted from 1,200 to 25, but I want to let the select board know and realize that the state offers grants for towns to take advantage of, and they offer classes at no charge. So some of the grants take care of transportation and other expenses that that you'll end up with beyond the class itself. We have tax maps that are updated annually, and that line item did not change. That's split between the assessor's office and the general fund. Our annual software fees have stayed unchanged, and equipment, I believe equipment was lowered. We don't foresee seeing a need for any new equipment in our office. Cameras have been replaced with personal cell phones. There has been talk of tablets being introduced for use out in the field. However, the current staff doesn't feel a need for it, and if we did introduce it, I would wait until a townwide reappraisal, and that could be rolled into the reappraisal funds. That's, I think, about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Are there questions?
I'd like to just add a couple of quick things, just for the broader perspective, mainly for the public who's listening. So the fundamental work of the assessor's office is to set the values for real estate in Brattleboro, and also for business personal property, and that's really important to the fairness of our property tax system. As we all know, we're really heavily dependent on the property tax, and for the property tax to be assessed fairly, it's one tax rate that applies to everybody, and so the fair and equitable establishment of those values, done initially by Jennifer and her staff, and then reviewed by the listers, board of listers. That's what makes the system, retains the fairness, supports the fairness in the system when we all pay our fair share of the taxes. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to note that they do that very efficiently. There's, in addition to Jennifer as the full-time assessor, there's a 30 hours per week assistant assessor and a full-time assessment technician, I believe we're going to be calling.
Assessor's technician.
Assessor technician, which is the position that has become vacant recently, and so we've slightly revised the duties and expectations for that position to raise up the expectations for they'll assist in the technical work of the office.
You have a very calm and critical thinking energy about you, and it's been really good to have you at the helm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Is there board members that have questions or comments for Jennifer about the assessor's office budget?
I have one.
Yes.
You mentioned you're looking at some changes for the business property assessment area. What's the phrase I'm looking for?
Business personal property.
Business personal property.
Well, the business, we have, the town of Brattleboro does tax business personal property. I want to say somewhere around 2013, but could have been 12, or even earlier. We implemented business license program. So with a business filing for their business license, they will be exempt for the first $5,000 of business personal property. There's a $50 fee for that business license. We're currently taking in licenses for the 2020 year. The deadline for that is December 31st, and if you get your license prior to December 31st, you will not be fined. There are fines that do come in after January 2nd, or on January 2nd. It works how we how the process goes, but it feels clunky to me, and I'd like to work with the new staff to see how we can make it better, see how we can improve it, and it works for some businesses enjoy the online form. They're getting used to it. I don't see that changing. It's just the billing process, the informing, and trying to cut the expense of mail, postage, paper, so forth. If there's something we can do, and then the time we take to record so that we're making sure that we're keeping track of the funds coming in. So I just want to work with new staff to make it a little better.
Yeah. Well, as you may know, I run a business in town, so I'm familiar with that process. And I think overall, I think your description was perfect. It's a little clunky, but it does work. So we could probably make it a little better. Maybe even for the online payments. I think for some reason I choose to register online, but then I actually bring a check.
Most people do.
That
well,
may
maybe
just
it's a
be-
50-50.
I've never been able to pay online.
Yeah.
I pay online.
You pay online?
Okay. Well,
I
So
can't
does my
get it to
husband.
work.
I think it might just be my old-timey nature.
Tim's just old.
Wants to
Reaching
come-
out to businesses and having a conversation with them with a full staff, we would be able to do that. Right now, we don't, but that's another avenue, is what's working, what isn't, how can we make it better?
Right.
So that's another part that I would implement to help with that. Thank you for your
I
comments.
have a question.
Yes.
How much revenue does the town receive from that?
Is it
I got the answer to that.
50,000?
Yes,
Cool.
it's about that.
Sounds nice.
It's a lot of businesses.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
The thing that is always a conundrum in our household is that there's a state license and the town license, and they're at different times. And if you're streamlining and if you could coordinate, that would be nice.
Let me know what that time is that the state
Yeah,
requires.
that's good feedback, Liz.
Yeah.
That's March, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's March.
When's ours?
March 15th.
December 31st.
Ah,
Yes.
yep. Okay. Good feedback.
Okay.
It's like a-
Well, we put out, I think we do this because we send out a notice for your business personal property asset reports. We actually send those reports out for businesses to fill out in February. And they are due April 20th.
It's not the end of the world if you can't coordinate them, I'm just saying. We're always going, now, which one is which?
Food
So-
for thought, though.
Actually, your notices is one of my favorite because you tell us December 31st, but you warn, I get one in like November sometime,
Right.
and I can say, oh, yeah, I'll pay it on the December 10th. But then if I forget, they send me another one.
Which I'm working on, and I might be a little late. I'm
Sorry, Tim,
supposed
I
to
will
send one out
forget.
tomorrow.
No, I won't forget.
You're
It's-
busy.
won't know.
You got
It's
your hands
marked,
full.
but it feels friendly that way, that you have a long
Good.
time span to prepare.
Good.
You don't get a summons for your second communication.
No.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Further
Thank
questions
you.
or comments or compliments for Jennifer and Jennifer's department?
Don't forget to not send me one this year.
I
Okay.
will write
You
it down
you
as
can ignore
soon as
that
I leave the desk.
No, I retired from my business.
You retired.
Ah,
Wow. Okay,
the
noted.
woodworking thing?
Well, the commercial part of it, yeah.
As the wood turns.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank
Thanks,
you so
Jennifer.
much, Jennifer. All right.
Next up is, sorry.
No, that's fine. I just like reading it off the list because I can say next up under FY21 proposed budget, we have Planning Services Department. Sue
Indeed.
Fillion.
So as Sue comes to the table, I just want to underscore one thing that might not jump out from the numbers in the budget. First of all, we're on page 7 near the bottom at the beginning of the planning department budget. Sue will present that and the continuing budget over on page 8 in a moment. But I wanted to just underscore that the sustainability coordinator, who we're in the final stages of hiring, is going to be an employee within Sue's team in the planning services office. And so just sort of an accountability moment here for the $100,000 that the community rallied to put in the budget for this position. You'll remember last year it was just $100,000 in the same line item where traditionally for many years we had $10,000
Yes.
for climate protection is what it was
Yes.
called. It was under auxiliary services. So in this year's proposed budget, that line item is proposed as 0 because within planning services, there's approximately $58,000 worth of salary outside of planning services, but in the employee benefits part of the budget, there's about $33,000 worth of benefits for this employee. And then within planning services, there is a new line item created called Sustainability Program, where we're proposing $10,000 of expense of funding to be used for programmatic work, whether that's outreach to the community or whether it's events or to be determined by the sustainability coordinator and Sue. So together those figures add up to slightly over $100,000, and that doesn't fully account for the cost of having an employee on the team. I mean, there's operating expenses within the office and within the municipal center and so on, that in addition to that. So we just wanted to make sure that the community's aware that while the $100,000 appears to have disappeared, it's actually well invested in this employee who's in this position that's been created, and we'll have the employee coming aboard sometime early in the new year.
Thank you for that clarification, Peter. Sue, if you're ready, you can start however you'd like.
I am. So I'm going to start like Jennifer and give you an overview of the Planning Services Department. So as Peter noted, we're a growing department. So there are 3 full-time staff right now. There's myself, Brian Bannon, who's the zoning administrator and also the floodplain manager for the town, and also an assistant health officer. And then there is Andrew Graminski, who is our newly hired planning technician. So he's a recent college graduate with a planning degree, and that's going to tie back to the budget, another line item later. So we provide a variety of services. Most people in the community might interact with us because of permitting. So if you're doing an addition, you're putting up a sign, you're doing new construction, you need a zoning permit. So that's how we interact with a lot of the general public. We also consult on large development projects. So if somebody's building a house, doing a major subdivision, a new business, they often are meeting with us to understand our regulations, and we consult with them and give them some guidance. We do long-term planning. Like right now, we're working on the downtown design plan. We've been involved with a tri-park master plan to provide safer homes for people outside of the floodplain in Mountain Home Park. We do hazard mitigation planning as well, and all of those include public outreach. We also, not only do we do long-term planning efforts, we participate in long-term planning efforts. So several state projects we're involved with, whether it's the Hinsdale Bridge, the Putney Road Plan, we're often have a seat at the table for those. We can provide guidance on potential grants and loans from various state and federal sources, and we're also often applicants to either support projects in our department or in the town. We do health and zoning code enforcement. The health enforcement has increased over the years, so I think. We take care of the E911 addressing and do the coordination over the liaison between the state and the town. We can do GIS mapping and spatial analysis. We manage the flood program for the town, so we participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. So not only does that incorporate permitting, but there's a lot of outreach so that people know what their what options they have for flood insurance. And then we also
go above and beyond. We've taken several actions so that we can help reduce the cost of flood insurance for people who have it in the town. We assist other departments with projects and permitting. So if there's Act 250, if there's some stormwater permitting, we often help out with that. And we have also helped nonprofits in the town that maybe need to go through Act 250 and give some guidance. We have the Brownfields program. We do a lot of hazard mitigation planning, working with various groups that are conserving land and restoring floodplain. We also support several town boards and commissions, and several of them have statutory functions. So there's the Development Review Board, which does site plan, subdivision review, local Act 250 review, the Planning Commission, who are kind of make recommendations on land use policy to the Select Board, the Conservation Commission, and the Design Review Committee, which is a newer board, which reviews development in historic districts and makes recommendations to the zoning administrator or the Development Review Board. And then we also just get involved with various community planning efforts. So I sit as an ex officio member of the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance. Various projects pop up and we get involved. The Army Corps has been looking at different potential flood restoration projects in Brattleboro, so we kind of consult with them. Winston Prouty is going through a planning effort. We get involved with projects like that. And then our office also provides a lot of support for the People Forms, which is on our website. There's a lot of those fill-in forms. So Brian does a lot of that. Permitting, we generally have about 190 permits that are issued every year, and there's about 25 to 30 applications that go before the Development Review Board. And then lastly, we work a lot with the various state agencies, whether it's the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Homeland Security. So we have a lot of relationships with those staffs. So that's a little bit about what we do. And then upcoming for the 2021 budget, we do need to update our hazard mitigation plans, so that will be a project. And then we'll have the bike and pedestrian scoping study for Western Avenue that might be going on into that fiscal year. And then you already talked a little bit about it tonight, but it's been on the Planning Commission, their radar, to kind of be ready with cannabis regulation, zoning. So that's been a conversation that they had over the summer, wanting to be ready when that happens.
Thank you very much, Sue. As you can see, the Planning Commission is kind of has hands in every single pot, and so I'm really glad that we have you at the helm. You have a very dynamic and sharp personality, and you have a really good team. We're very lucky with almost all of our teams and so in our town, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I see the budget. I don't have a ton of questions because it's pretty self-explanatory to me. However, are there members of the board who have questions or comments or anything to say about the planning department?
While you're thinking, I'll point out that the proposal in toto is so efficient that we mentioned earlier that the costs for this department are increasing by about $70,000 to accommodate the sustainability coordinator position. Mm-hmm. And the proposed budget is increasing from last year only by $63,000.
Yes.
So, nice work.
Pretty
We were able to
self-explanatory.
reduce the consultant costs in part because of the hiring of the planning technician, bringing us back to kind of full capacity, and then he also has skills that we can draw on. So that's helpful.
Awesome.
Well, I'd just like to say that I'm very familiar with the work of the planning department, and I think it's excellent. And not only this past year has Sue and her team had a tremendous amount of outreach with the downtown master plan and some very fun and interesting projects that get the community to understand what land use planning is, which is usually esoteric, but I think it's common sense. And also, when when Sue was talking about the permits, Brian Bannon did such an excellent job helping the BOC get their warming hut permit, and now it's there and in place, and it's snowed, and it's great. And I think Andrew's a great addition to the team as well.
Thank you.
Strong department.
It's-
Disclosure.
it's
Are
a-
there members of the town staff who have any? Because that's all that's left in our audience. Are there members of the Jennifer Star and
Still public.
BCTV?
There is still public.
I have a couple.
Oh, Ricky's talking about you. Yes, Tim.
Would you like the softball or the more challenging question first?
Oh, let's go challenging first.
Honestly.
Okay, good. I like to give an option. I'm learning this about a toddler. It's good to give them this or this.
Yes.
I'm not
Those are
making
fake
any
options.
comparisons.
It's okay.
You're not supposed to give real options to the toddler, Tim.
No editorializing.
Well, they're not real. Anyway, the more challenging one. So, sustainability program budget line item. Can you explain why you're, I'm assuming in collaboration with our town manager, recommending that be there?
For me, I liked it being a separate line item because I think that there was such a community call for this position or the use of the money towards sustainability that I didn't want it to get commingled with other, projects that maybe the department's working on. So it's a set aside fund that's specifically for sustainability projects.
Good
I
idea.
see. Well, agreed if that's sort of the thing, but I kind of recall the discussion at town meeting going from, well, we have this 10,000 and it doesn't really do anything, to ballooning obviously up to a position so that we have a person to do the things. I don't really recall, and also we should keep that 10,000. I recall the conversation being more like,
It's-
we should really have a position.
It's within the 100,000.
Yeah, I think it's
So
a smart idea.
it's a
Within the 100,000.
awkward, I'm sorry.
No, go.
It's an awkward coincidence that they're both $10,000. The
Okay.
$10,000 from year to year to year was just $10,000 as an allocation so that there would be something available for the energy coordinator and work around those issues in the community. Last year, that same $10,000 was in the budget that we recommended to you and you recommended to town meeting. And at town meeting, when they increased it to 100, there was that very robust conversation about wanting a position. We made it clear at that time that it would be the board who would decide whether it was spent on programming or on a position. You had all that community input and your own discussion, several meetings earlier this year, and created the position. So the $100,000 investment from the community is going primarily to the person, but when we totaled up the sort of out-of-pocket expenses to the town for funding the position, and it came to around $91,000, we, between the three of us actually, Sue and Patrick and myself, looked at that, thought about the intent of the representative town meeting, and then carried out by the direction from the board. And we thought it would be good to include $10,000 worth of programming money so that there will be costs to
Yeah, absolutely.
activities and events
Memberships.
that might be organized by this coordinator to promote sustainability in the community.
Yeah, the way the job is described, there's a lot of community outreach. There's going to be a lot of, there's going to be a program. There will be sustainability programs offered, and so
outreach.
it's different than the other functions of the department.
What I kind of like about it is it was always said, there's only so much a volunteer can do with 10,000, and it's kind of nice to carry in and say, okay, let's see what a fully paid, robustly compensated staff member can do with 10,000. I like the way that carries through, so I think that was a smart idea.
Well, I'll remind everybody that
Cute.
one of the cruxes of the counter-argument for the sustainability coordinator was that so many, in my opinion, of the actions, the future actions that we don't know what's going to come down the pike, but so many of those actions are already being done very well by existing town staff. This is going back to our arguments. And using the money for a salary, while certainly alleviating some of the duties of all of our excellent town staff, and that's a positive, would leave us with not so much money to do the programs with.
So what are you hoping would happen with the $9,000, $10,000 that were left over? What is your end?
I didn't really see it as, I thought the discussion became, we must have this, the community wanted this sustainability coordinator, not that we must spend $100,000. It was more of a, in my opinion, an up to get the job done.
But it wasn't,
Because if you recall the discussion at town meeting, it was, yeah, I had a.
nope, that's
ink-
fine, I didn't
ink
mean to see that.
explosion. The discussion became, we must get this person, and will 50 be enough? The question was thrown to Peter, and he said, no, 100 would be enough. And I didn't really interpret that as like, use everything you can, and then make sure you spend that extra $10,000 on nice stuff. I interpret it as, get the sustainability coordinator at all costs.
I'm not sure it was ever written as an up to, though. I think it was written
Yeah.
as 100, and if it's written
Oh,
as 100,
certainly,
I
but-
think we have to use it
But
that
normally
way.
in our budgets, but that's what budgets are for. You budget things, and then you hopefully don't spend up to that budget, and then you adjust the budget for next time. So I just find it a little curious that it goes along with a $10,000 price tag.
I have a comment.
Okay, you and then David.
Well, David, you go
No,
first.
no, you go.
Well,
It's not really necessary.
moving on from our vote that some of us dissented from, and having someone, coming on board to do this work, I think it's best to start on a good footing with some spending money to get the job done in the way that the town envisioned, as the resolution said, and the community wanted. I think one of the goals of the sustainability coordinator will be to seek grant money, but I really don't see the need to, hamstring this person by not having any purse to use. And so I would definitely think that the money left over within the $100,000 is appropriate for the planning department to use to get this effort off the ground.
Yeah, I think my concern, not to enter into a debate about that,
But here we go.
why not?
I was like, and then.
I'm the one who has to get up at 5 in the morning, so, but
Truth.
I think it's a little odd to attach a new employee position that we really don't know anything about to a spending line item. You wouldn't hire somebody for DPW and attach it to extra sidewalk money.
Well,
we
we kind of know a lot what they're
Done
doing.
that.
Please, I really would.
All right, David,
Yeah, I
David.
mean, there's a lot of back and forth
David,
here
go
as
ahead.
opposed to participating. It's not extra money, and it's not public works. None of the public works jobs or the traditional jobs that we have that are in place involved as many staff members developing the job description, figuring out how to make it work most effectively, researching other positions, looking into the experience of other towns in order to figure out how to do this and how to make sure it's effective. The purpose of all of this, once the decision is made, is to have it, let's do it in a way that's going to work. And I think that's what's here. And having been born and spent the first 8 years of my life in Niagara Falls, New York, I've seen a lot of water go over the falls and under the bridge, and I think that's what this is. And I would just assume we sort of, I mean, you can keep rehashing it if you want, but I think it's really,
It's a rehashing.
well, it sounds that way to me.
Oh, okay. What I'm pointing out to everyone, that it's now a line item.
Yeah.
So if this new sustainability coordinator says, this is great, this is a great job I'm doing, here's my report, we can evaluate it as a board, but you know what? This $10,000 line item should be $100,000. So the budget hawk in me sees this as a way to backdoor not only the sustainability coordinator, but a lot more spending for this concern. So
It's remarkably
That feels
insulting
like a stretch,
to the staff.
Tim. And I really,
I
you
don't
know that
think
I
it's
always get along with
remarkably
you very well, but that
Back
feels like a
door?
huge stress.
Backdoor
Yeah.
around.
no, I'm not implying.
Yes.
Well, I'd
Well,
like to
find a
speak to
better
it.
term.
So I know I believe you didn't mean it that way, but I'd like to just speak maybe for the broader benefit of the audience of the way in which we formulate a budget. So the sustainability coordinator won't determine individually what is proposed for you to consider in this line item next year. The sustainability coordinator will certainly have a role in that conversation. Sue will, in the first instance, determine as part of her planning for the overall operation of the planning services department what she thinks is an appropriate allocation for that. Patrick and I are going to be scrutinizing Sue's work, and what comes to you by statute and practice is my recommendation as town manager to you. So there's a lot of winnowing that goes on. The budget process is not the time of year when I make friends within town staff. It's the time when I do the first step of deciding what I think we can afford in the big picture, trying to balance all the different needs of the town with our financial wherewithal and how it fits into our longer term planning that we do together. And then you go through this process and make your changes to it that you think are appropriate. And so what I would say about that $10,000 is it is not random. It is not thrown in there as spending money, but it is in fact sort of unknowable to us at this point exactly what the scope of that out-of-pocket expense that isn't personnel expense, what's going to be required in order for this position to thrive and accomplish what we all want it to accomplish. And so we thought it was reasonable to use that balancing number for this year from the $100,000 that was the clear intent of the community, and then learn as we go along. And as we learn and as we reflect on that, you may decide, you and your successors, a year from now may decide that this is too little money. You may also decide that it's unnecessary funding, that there's actually just all kinds of ways in which we're partnering with people and we don't need to have a non-personnel related sustainability line item. I don't know where we'll land on that. We'll take a good, solid, objective look at it before we bring you a proposal, instead of one that is harder to defend because it's so conceptual this year. And then you'll judge whether or not it's a well-defended number when we're here a year from now.
Okay. And I would admit
for
that using the phrase backdoor was a poor choice of words. What I was trying to communicate is that just as it's very difficult to unstaff someone away from a very limited town staff, to take away a position when a community starts to get into a groove of a position, it's also it's hard as a board to get rid of line items, and they tend to increase. That's what they do. So my problem with seeing that there is sort of like the unknown nature of it.
I have one more comment.
Yes.
I see this job, this position as split between being a resource within the town staff on sustainability elements and also have a public-facing role in considerable outreach. And I think that the funding is earmarked for the outreach.
Absolutely.
And really, of the two focuses of the position, I think the community was definitely focused on the outreach. And that, I think, will have more expenses than the technical internal staff position. And that just, it makes sense to me in terms of an estimate. But the other question I had for you, Tim, is this the hardball question or the softball?
Lord.
I went hardball first.
Any time for anything harder than that, that's
I'm happy. I'll give you the softball if you'd like.
Sure.
In the I have to go back. I lost my place. In the revenue side,
Yes.
which we love, right? We love revenue. I'm curious just about in the actuals from 2017 to 2019. The planning permit fees seem to be nosediving fairly steadily, and then you adjusted the budget from 2020 to 2021 from 50 to 40. Can you just comment on why that's sort of heading down?
We're not seeing a lot of large development. So some of our high years were years with like Red Clover Common, which had, one big project can have fees of 10, 12 grand. So we're seeing a lot of small projects, and not a lot of big. It's always, it's kind of difficult to kind of think about what's on the horizon. What are those bigger projects that we might know that are there? So it's kind of a guesstimate every year. It's trending.
So it kind of weights fairly heavily on larger projects
It does.
versus back decks being built.
Yes.
It's also highly variable. So while your conclusion in looking at the 3 years of actuals is fair because that's all we show
Right.
here, if you were looking at a longer, more columns of prior years, you'd see that this is actually not a trend. You wouldn't interpret from this that it is going down and likely to keep going down. Rather, it's one that bounces around, and it's for that reason that we didn't see a reason to justify staying at the 50. It's been 50 for several years in the budget, and it's now been several years since we hit 50. And so for the reasons Sue described, we thought it was responsible to bring it down to 40, but we're not worried that it's heading down and not going to bounce back.
Right.
Thank you. It's pretty soft, right?
Further questions or comments from the board? Okay.
Start.
Out of the hot seat, Sue. Thank you very much. And at this time, we move to item 3 under the FY21 proposed budget, and we move to Star Electronica from Brooks Memorial Library Director.
And the library budget begins
Goddess.
on page 10.
Boss. Lady. All right, Star, however you want to lead us in, please
All right,
do.
well, first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the library, because there's nothing I'd rather do. So the mission of the Brooks Memorial Library is to connect people with resources to inspire, inform, and empower our diverse community. And resources can be a lot of things. Naturally, people immediately think about books because that was the resource that people had when libraries were first begun in this country. However, for you people at home, we also circulate snowshoes. So you can hot-foot it on over there. We're open till 9 tonight, and pick up a pair of snowshoes and you can snowshoe home. We have, among other things, in our cataloging department right now, we have a meter that will measure the electrical presence that people were talking about in the cell phone tower discussion earlier. So you can take that home and see what the electric presence is in your house if you want to. So what we do is, libraries are about sharing. And what we do is come together as a community, purchase resources that we don't all need all the time, or that we don't have the resources to purchase for ourselves, and then we share them as a community. And after, it took me about 30 years of learning that, or of giving spiels to preschoolers when I discovered that, because I was going on and on about it. You can do this at the library, and you can do that at the library. And finally, a little girl raised her hand and said, that's sharing. That's exactly what it is. So also, I just want to say that, libraries, are built on the principles of sustainability. We're the original reuse institution, and also on equity, because we're open to all and available to all. So I feel so lucky to be able to support those two values every day in the work that I do. We circulate about 140,000 items a year. We have about 135,000 visits to the library in a year. And last year we had 565 programs, so that's almost 2 a day for when we're open. The programs truly do address lifelong learning. We have rhyme time for toddlers.
No, it's a bad day. What day is it?
It's Wednesday morning. 10:30.
We'll try, make one or two.
Because it's valuable not only for the toddlers that come, but it's wonderful for parents because they get to meet other parents. They also experience the modeling that goes on with presenting stories and songs and activities and engaging small children. And we all know that that's really how small children learn. So the other thing we know is that it's important for people to have human contact between 5 to 7 times a day in their lives to maintain their mental health. And for many people, that is the library. They come in and they talk to us. As I was heading over here this evening, a woman was engaged in conversation with our desk staff, and you could tell she was there for the conversation. You know, she may not walk out with a book, but she was there to talk to somebody. And then our programming continues on. We have our first Wednesday events that are sponsored by the Vermont Humanities Council, which brings us a really rich array of programs. We have been partnering with Compassionate Brattleboro to have compassionate community conversations. Brandy's going to be at the library next week.
I just ran that through my calendar part of my brain as you were speaking.
And she'll be talking about downtown Brattleboro. Dave and I are in cahoots to cook up something for Wednesday morning for grown-ups. So anyway, the other value that libraries are built on is partnership and collaboration, and so luckily we live in a really vibrant community where that's possible. Our growing areas are teen services. We have a great teen room, great teen librarian, and now we have a teen advisory board. We also are trying to expand our outreach. We have many big ideas, big plans, and it's just finding the time and the staff to do that. But really, it's important to both the staff and the trustees to move from library as place to library as presence so that everybody thinks of the library. One thing that's happened to help with that was our recent renovation. Because we have really become an important meeting place, especially now that the police station isn't here anymore, so the building closes down, so a lot of town meetings have moved over to the library on a regular basis. And then with our small meeting rooms, we have entrepreneurs meeting there, we have people having distance meetings with business partners, around the country and around the world. And then we have people coming together to read plays together or interview one another for oral history. So those rooms are almost always in use. And then, in addition to the storytime services, we also have Matt, the wonderful Matt Wojcik, who is available for people to come in, bring their devices, he helps them figure them out. And he is, if anyone has ever availed themselves of his services, he is really great. And that's just a standard service that we have at the library. So our funding comes from the town. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We really appreciate it. And but we also are incredibly fortunate that we have an endowment. So our trustees are very excellent stewards of that, and they're very prudent stewards of that those funds. Our endowment does now just barely cap $2 million, which but that is held in reserve, and they draw down 4%, which is the recommended amount, every year, and most of that money goes to materials. So that the endowment took over funding a lot of our material purchases so that we could reinstitute hours that had been cut with staffing that had been cut with budget cuts earlier. And they also pursue grants, and that's how we got the snowshoes. And then we have the wonderful Friends, the Friends of Brooks Memorial Library. Many of you are friends. And the Friends help us with enhancements to the library that we couldn't do otherwise. They pay for most of the programming. They pay for the first Wednesdays series. They pay for the summer reading program, which keeps, or the summer learning program actually. It keeps kids' brains engaged all summer long so they don't have a summer slump when they go back to school. And they pay for services such as our downloadable books and our streaming video, Canopy, which is so popular, Mango, you can learn a language and interact online. And so, and then they also pay for the Foundation Center, which is a huge deal in this community, in this region of not-for-profits. The Foundation Center, we are now the only Vermont location for the Foundation Center. And so nonprofits can come and get information on how to apply for grants and funding.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
It's great. Come by anytime.
What I've always liked about you heading up the library is that when some of our more vulnerable and marginalized population has started more and more to feel comfortable integrating into the mainstream, your doorstep is one of the first places that integration has taken place. And rather than being uncertain on how to host individuals who haven't been used to being hosted, you have always been compassionate and proactive about understanding ways to serve changing, diverse clientele at the library, and I'm very appreciative of that. You're a powerhouse in that regard.
Well, and the entire staff, and
the entire staff.
The trustees' support as well on that.
Yeah.
That's one of our key service areas, is to provide a welcoming space for all.
Well, you've done well. So you and the staff and trustees should all really rest comfortably in the idea that while there's always more to do, you've done really well.
Thank you.
Are there members of the board that would like, yes, Liz?
I'm also a great believer in the library, but I wondered, what's tomorrow night's first Wednesday?
Yeah.
It's U.S. immigration policy.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Other members of the board?
Too quick. I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
Which one would you like first?
Terrified us all.
Golly.
Sorry, Tim. You led me into that.
I'll take the question. I may
Okay.
not know the answer, but I know where to find it.
Oh, I
That's the
bet.
librarian's creed. So, okay.
That's what I'm supposed to say. A parent, too, right?
Yeah, that works out.
Not always pretend I know the answer. Didn't you, I recall, just a couple of years ago, you started to, or you did, eliminate fines?
So glad you asked.
This is just, I'm throwing this out so you can talk about that a little bit if
Yes.
you wanted to, but I had a question, too.
Okay, yes, and thanks to our wonderful trustees and to the select board, we were able to pass a policy to eliminate fines. And this was not, we were by no means the first library to do it. I will say that there's been a blizzard of libraries that have done it behind us, from huge systems like Chicago Public, I believe, just went fine-free. Seattle Public, I believe, has gone fine-free. Entire counties in California have gone fine-free. So people have come to realize that it is really an issue of equity. And that conversation started in 2017 when the whole issue of equity surfaced here. And in fact, I wrote down your comment, Tim.
Really?
It was the outcome of a big Democratic push from the community.
Ah.
And part of the
that's-
conversations we had in this room were that that it was great to say you have a commitment to equity, but you need to assign resources to make that happen. And so the trustees took on the purchase of a lot of more materials so that we could reduce that revenue.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I'm in full support. My question is, just because someone else might have encountered this, we do a lot of board books, so we've been, so I think I had 4 out and I was late getting the renewed, I did renew it online and I was
Yes.
late and it shows up as fines.
Right.
But are they not real?
They're not, they get, They are eliminated when you return the materials, because we had to have some mechanism
Yeah.
that people couldn't just keep checking out more and more
Well, I
materials.
felt the shame. I really internalized it.
And see, and that's
So-
why we had to get rid of fines. We didn't want anyone to feel ashamed.
I know.
So just know
This is me
you'll come
pulling your
back,
leg.
you'll be welcomed with open arms
Oh, good.
and lots more board books.
I feel so much better.
Those
Good.
board books are good, aren't they? They keep
They're-
those little hands
they're
from
good.
just ripping things.
His new thing is, he takes 2 books and he wants you to sit down and read one, and he reads his. And you don't even need to
Nice.
read it to him, and he's like,
Cute.
yeah.
You have done such a good job. Because that is the key indicator of reading success, is if a child sees an adult reading and then models that behavior, then
Yeah.
they'll keep making the next step and the next step towards literacy. And then once you can read, the whole world's there for you.
We just assume he's getting these good behaviors from his daycare, 'cause I'm not sure.
Well,
That's
there's
what I
one
always
good job,
assume
too.
about my kid.
But I will say we have had so much anecdotal support for eliminating fines.
Yeah.
And once a staff member was coming in as a family was leaving, and the kids were clamoring with the parents saying, I love going to the library. I'm so glad we came back to the library. Is it because they don't have fines now? I said, yes. And that's what we want.
Have that cloud hanging over
Yeah.
you.
Exactly.
The only easy comment I wanted to make is Canopy. We just discovered it.
Right.
Holy cow!
yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
about
Oh,
this?
do I ever?
Okay, I got a movie for you, Charade.
Canopy.
Charade.
Oh, yeah.
60. You
Oh,
know,
I
what?
didn't
Oh,
saw
I love
when it
that.
First came out too.
well,
Will
okay.
you check it out?
Canopy is
wonderful?
amazing.
It was really good.
And
Maybe you find truth. Oh, you probably already know.
Canopy is amazing. It's
Yeah.
also super expensive. It's but it's paid for by the Friends of Books Memorial Library.
Of course it is. You're awesome.
Canopy.
And watch for your annual appeal letter in the mail.
Okay, good. Good, because I'm going to check it out and
Oh,
want
yeah,
that
it's
annual
really
appeal.
good.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand that if the Friends
Mm-hmm.
and the trustees pay for materials, why is there a book item on here?
They pay for most of it. So the book item is, I believe, $5,000 for adult books. The endowment is for $20,000 because $5,000 just wouldn't cover enough.
Right.
And book prices are always going up. Also, we do have, in order to service the community, because we have these intense readers here, we often have to buy multiple copies of a new title. Louise Penny, get out of the way.
Yeah, I know.
So we end up having to expend a lot of funds, to satisfy our readership.
Thank you, I just wanted to understand that.
People are always
Good.
requesting that they buy new books.
Yes.
And they do.
And we do, yes.
Have another
Excellent.
one for you.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Are there members of the Sue or Ricky that would like to make any comments?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. We're pretty spoiled with the library in this town. If there might always be something we can say that we're lacking, but it's not the library. Thank you very much, Star.
Thank you.
I always have an affinity because of our names are spelled the same way.
It's true.
It's pretty special to me. All right.
If you two got married, Star's name would be Star Star.
Star gave me a shirt one time that is the Rosie, and it says it says Star can do it. It's pretty awesome. As long as I keep the tummy down, it looks great on me. But I'm never gonna do that because I don't care and I love pasta. So good. So that was tonight's episode of the FY21 budget. Stay tuned for next week's episode. We continue these weekly meetings and continue budget items at least through the 10th, possibly through the 17th, and beyond for the next 3 weeks past that if we so choose.
Correct.
Is that like
Man.
to infinity and beyond?
And beyond, better not be infinity. We gotta, at some point, nope.
May I summarize really fast
Please
for the
do,
public so
Peter.
they know what's coming?
Yes.
That was an excellent summary. So
your preview.
next week is focused on budget, and it's all the little items. So it's the small offices, the town manager's office, the finance department, the town clerk, along with things like the auxiliary services and the human services and all that.
Star,
So,
something fell.
so it'll be just budget, and it'll be a variety of things.
Good.
And then on the 17th, there'll be a regular
Yep.
select board meeting with other business besides budget to be done. But one item that night will be for us to take stock of where we are. We will have completed the first time all the way through the budget.
Yep.
And I'll summarize for you in a memorandum in preparation for the 17th where I think we are in terms of the issues that have arisen and what you're looking for from staff. We'll get your direction that night on the 17th of whether that's a good list or whether it needs to be modified. And then staff will provide those materials for the meetings that we have in January when you'll do your additional review and make your decisions.
So
That's
the,
great.
The 17th is for all those things that you've kind of forgot to bring up.
17th is the catch-all moment, like,
Yep.
You can
put it
break
on the
things
list if you
open
want
again.
more information about it. Yep,
Yeah.
And I know I've had a lot of questions about human services, and you just said that's next week.
correct.
Right, so next week, for those who have asked me, and maybe I've answered your email in my head instead of in my keyboard, next week, human services. It happens. I'm not gonna lie, I'm almost 40. I know my faults.
You and Jeanette.
Am I not false?
No age comments.
Am I not false?
10 years beyond the range of trustability.
All right, now that we're all getting quite bippy, mostly myself, and we have no further business to discuss, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Excellent, David has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourns at 8:10 p.m. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week, 6:15.
Digital, and in there is Acorn TV. That's been English and Canadian.
Thank
And it's not like Canopy with all the people. Right. It's really great. It's
I don't care, I'm fine, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
That's
have.
fine. I just,